the one thing that defines success in its entirety is growth. Practice makes perfect, which is wrong. So practice makes progress. The end of 2018 was when I started to fall ill. They kept me for a week, put me in isolation, gave me a concoction of drugs. I got diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, pure exhaustion, completely debilitating. I really had to find myself again. And that is the beginning of the brand. And then when people started to show interest in my journey, as well as the product, it snowballed. The biggest thing was when we won the Theo Perfectus Award. And that for me was the real solidification of maybe I'm doing the right thing here. We brought in some running products. Within a month or two of selling it, we got a legal letter saying that we had to cease and desist. One of their founders came up to my stand, got in my face and picked a fight with me. And I got so absorbed with what the brand had become, not where it had come from, that I genuinely thought, it's finished. We've had a good stint. It's over. I can't win this. I didn't really have a plan for what was next. I was just upset that that was the end. And then we rebranded. It was way more positive than I could have ever hoped. We didn't lose anyone. If anything, we gained. Anybody who tells you that you have to give 100% of your time to your brand, your business to make it work is a moron. My brand works, and I don't give 100% of the time to it.
Hey, Jay from Gymbuck. Welcome to the Grind Diaries podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Not at all. Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate you making the journey up from Southampton to come and join me. I really appreciate you taking that time.
Okay, it's a pleasure to be here, mate. Thank you for having me on.
No, not at all. So, quite interestingly, you're the first person that I've had on the podcast that I've never actually met in person. We've had a few phone calls and whatever, and I think it's quite an interesting story of how we kind of came to meet. Basically, so I started to follow Jay on social media. Yep. Really loved what you were putting out, really loved what you were doing. So Jay's founder of Gymbuck, which is a really cool gym attire brand.
Nice plug there. Appreciate
I love that. I love it. And yeah, so I'm, quite an avid gym goer. I know I don't look like it.
I got a good frame for it. All right.
I'm breathing in. So, I'm always interested in, different kind of gym brands. So I was really keen to kind of, seeing that you're local, wanted to give you a follow and just loved what you were doing on social media. I felt like what you're trying to get across, you're not just constantly plugging your brand, you're, sort of talking about the journey, which is exactly what we want to do on here. Yeah. So yeah, just kind of reached out and we kind of got chatting from there. And lo and behold, here we are. So yeah, it was really appreciate it. And
that's good. I appreciate the invite as well. Like I said, the content, as you already mentioned, we put out beyond just what we do with clothing, and it's nice to know that it's been seen as well. So for someone to go, oh, I'm interested in that based on what we put out, is it's nice to know it works.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's social media is such a big thing, right? And I was just really intrigued at the way you were kind of using it, and you've got this awesome brand, and you're kind of promoting it, but through a different channel. And the content that you're putting out is very kind of motivational and kind of the stuff that people that go to the gym want to sit and kind of listen to and watch. And I just thought that it was a really cool way to kind of promote the brand.
No, I appreciate it, and that's something I tend to focus on a lot. And the conversations me and my team have often is the content we put out isn't just about, oh, look how great our products are, because everybody sells products, right? The fitness industry is flooded with brands. So how we position ourselves differently is around the fitness journey and trying to encourage people, which is our tagline, unlock your potential to do such a thing. And that's what we try and do for our content, and nothing on our page is fake or, it's all everything we do every day. So we just try and be as authentic. It's quite a big word to throw around on social media, but we try as best possible to be authentic as possible. So.
Decent, yeah, and it really works as well. Yeah. By the way,
good.
We're
here. So
I kind of look at the content that you're putting out, and it really does motivate.
Good.
The quotes and all the rest of it. It's stuff that that I think is really really cool. Wicked. All right, so we start the podcast in the same way every week, and we start with a question, and you take this as you want, and kind of I'm really interested to get into the detail of how you perceive the question. So the question is, what is your definition of success?
Depending on what age you ask me this question, you might get a different answer. I've been asked this before in various different ways, and I guess it's a very difficult question to answer because there's so many different ways you can define success, right? It could be money, it could be family, could be your job, could be your status in society, it could be anything. But I think the one thing that defines success in its entirety, in all of those categories, in everything part of your life, is growth. Now, we all have this idea that you have to hit a certain goal or achieve a certain thing, whereas if you're just growing towards that direction, so like me being a dad, for example, I'm not the best dad out there, arguably, but as long as I'm continually improving, continuing growing in that space, that to me is successful. If I'm earning more money, which is another form of success, right? That's growing your pot, essentially, is success. Whether you're building a brand and you're getting new brand deals or meeting new people on podcasts like this, for example, growth is the common denominator of that, which I think is the only way you can measure success, because everyone's got a different take on it. So as long as you're leaning into the things you want to do and you're working towards that goal, which is growth, that to me is success.
Yeah, definitely. I really like that. So, excuse me. So you're just looking to improve all the time.
Nobody's perfect, right? I don't know who said it, and I probably butchered the quote, but they said something like, practice makes perfect, which is wrong. So practice makes progress.
Yeah.
And it's just that continual trying, and you're not always going to get it right, but if you get it wrong, you're still learning, and that to me is success, because you learned a lesson you didn't already know. I think we spend so much time looking at goals and looking at achievements, looking at status and wealth, and using that as a measure of success, whereas for everyone it's different. Not everybody wants to build a brand. Not everybody wants to sell clothing. Not everybody wants to go to the gym or start a podcast or whatever it may be. So whatever field you're in, whatever your chosen path is, as long as you're growing in that area, that should be considered success. Arguably, you will have different levels of success, right? So if you get a massive pay rise or a bonus, it's pretty successful, but it's not the end. I don't think we're ever finished. I think we'll always grow and always keep going in whatever direction we want to go towards our goals.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I think you're right in the fact that there's never the end. You know, you read stories. Like I'm quite a big boxing fan, so I followed Tyson Fury for a little while, and how he achieved everything that he set out to achieve, and then just crumbled because there was nothing else. Yeah, and I think that's really, it really highlights how dangerous goals can be at times.
It's good to have goals.
I think you've got to have them, but I think you've also got to have an idea of where you're going once you achieve them, if that makes sense.
I think if you set yourself, it's good to have big goals, right? We always talk about set yourself on sites that are so big that very few people are doing them. But it's also to recognise that the journey to get there is going to be lots of little goals, and it might change. I studied aerospace engineering in college. I wanted to be a pilot when I was a kid. And then I went into work and did things that were completely different to what I do now. And now I own a clothing brand. Did I predict that? No. You just adapt and you follow the path that you go, and your goals will change. Your achievements will find what makes you tick. So this whole idea that I have to earn 100 grand or I have to be the CEO of a company, if that's your goal, that's great, but that might not always be your goal. So I think if we set ourselves too hard an opportunity to reach success, you'll never get there. So I know one of my ambassadors is going into his first amateur bodybuilding show, but that won't be the end for him. Does he want to go pro? Does he want to change what he's doing and run a marathon? I mean, they're all different avenues to success, right? So how can we benchmark what his success is versus mine? So set yourself small goals, yes, but don't put so much pressure on yourself to be a certain someone, I think is the message.
Yeah, I like it. And how often do you, let's say from your perspective, different people map their goals out in different ways and, kind of look back at whether they've been successful or not in different ways? Like, what's your strategy for kind of making sure that you're growing, making sure that you're progressing?
For me, it's about recognizing the lessons you learn along the way and what you gain from them. So it's sort of, at the moment, the brand's going a direction. We've got a new style, a new vibe, and a new name, sort of. It was like a year and a half old now. We've got new brand deals. Now, every day there'll be something that's successful and not so successful. And it's about just measuring that forward motion. So we might be moving forward, we might fail at 5 things, but win at 3. But we're still going in the direction we want to head. So for me, it's not taking too much of what happens at face value and going, okay, we knew that didn't work, let's learn from it and move on. As long as there's always lessons and progression, that's how I measure success. Arguably, it's at different levels. We might get a massive win working on a job at the moment for something in the north, which is a very big job for us in terms of producing t-shirts. If I win it, great. If I don't, then we learn from it. So there are different levels to that. But for me, it's okay, what did we do well, what didn't we do well, and what did I learn from it? And I suppose that comes with maturity. I wasn't always like that. That's not how I've always been. But the more you go through it and the more you experience it, the easier it is to compartmentalize the good and the bad without focusing always on the bad.
Yeah.
And I just try and every now and then you can get yourself into a rut with work or anything, and you just can't see the wood through the trees, as they say. Sometimes you just got to pause, step back and go, okay. And we had this conversation on the way here actually about how easy it is to see how far you have to go without looking at how far you've already come.
Yeah.
And every now and then you've got to force yourself to reflect on that. And that's how I measure how well I'm doing. Because there are some days where it all goes completely wrong. And there's other days where it goes really, really great. It's just adapting to those and making sure that you don't hold yourself too accountable for it, if that makes sense. And just I keep saying, lean into it. Just lean into everything. And that's how, as long as I'm always doing that, that's how I measure myself as doing the right thing, if that makes sense.
It's interesting what you said about the maturity side of things, because you're absolutely right. I think the people that I've spoken to on this podcast recently, everybody said the same thing, that as you mature, your goals or your definition of success really changes. I think as a general rule, we kind of start out thinking, well, when I've got a penthouse on the Thames and a Ferrari, I've made it. And as you get more and more mature, you start to look at other parts of success. You start seeing success in a different way. And again, it's really interesting, which is why I asked the question, because I'd just love to get the kind of different perceptions of how people define success.
I think it's okay to want those things. If you're someone that's,
Absolutely.
We all like nice cars. Some people want to get a private jet. It's okay to want those things as long as you're measuring success that's based on what you want, not what other people around you want. And that's where people make the mistake, is that, your parents might want you to do a certain job or go to university or whatever it is. And if that's not your passion or not something you feel is your route to go down, then I don't think you'll ever be successful, because you have to really want to do it. And it takes time to understand what you want to do. Like I said, with my journey, I wanted to be a pilot, then I did aerospace engineering, and now I'm here. But you only do that by trying things. And letting other people dictate your route in life is not going to get you there. So you might be successful in someone else's eyes, but it's not what you want.
Yeah.
So having that nice car is great. And if you want to do that, fantastic. But sometimes it's not the be all and end all. You should do it for yourself, not for others.
It's about finding yourself out, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
about learning to understand
What makes you tick.
What makes you
And you're not
tick.
going to know that by just doing one thing.
No.
I know very rarely do people fall into one thing in their life and go, this is it, this is me. And if it is great, more for it. But I think variety is the spice of life, right? Another great quote. But the point being is you've got to try a few things to figure out what works for you. So just go for it. It's what's holding you back.
Definitely. Okay, cool. So let's take us back. How did this journey begin? Like how you kind of brought up, how did your upbringing sort of contribute to where you are now? And how did you kind of end up as a founder of a gym apparel company?
It's a long story. I'll give you the highlights. So it's hard to remember back when you were a kid, right? You kind of have snippets of memories, but I guess the earliest memories of mine are probably having a relatively good childhood. She went on holiday. Dad was a policeman. Mum was a childminder at the time. Standard for, nuclear family, if you will. Pretty regular, I guess. And there isn't really much more than that. Like, I consider it quite a good upbringing. But when I turned 11, 12, like my whole life got turned upside down, shall we say. And it's more common now than it ever was then, but my parents split. Adultery, that kind of way. I'll spare you the details. But yeah, they split up. And I remember my life being just very weird overnight all of a sudden. Now, they tried to make it work, but at that time, the first uproar for me was when it all fell apart, they decided they would move towns, basically, to get away from it all and have a fresh start. So we moved you're from my area, Hythe in Southampton.
Yep.
So we moved all the way around to the other side of the water to Hedge End, Botley, kind of Park Gateway. And you think, it's only moving house. But at the age of 11, when you've spent the last, year R all the way up to basically the first week of year 7, building friendships, having your so-called best mates and everything else, and then going into a school that you don't know anyone. And I didn't go to local schools either, because I joined in the middle of year 7. I went to a school way, way out. It took me like 40 minutes on a bus to get there. And at that age, that's a massive change, particularly when you've got everything going on at home as well. And I think that was probably my first experience of being like, okay, things have gone wrong now. and I probably didn't handle it very well. I couldn't remember, but it wasn't a great experience for me. And it seemed that everything from there on in just got worse and worse and worse, if that makes sense. So that's kind of my first experience of what a lot of what I talk about now as a brand, and the content you mentioned me putting out. I don't put it out because it's a nice glossy picture or a glossy image, but it's because I've lived it. And I'm not unique to anyone else. People have faced this all the time. But I think that was the beginning for me of, okay, things are going to get a bit harder. And they didn't really get any easier from there on in, to be honest. They split, my dad remarried, we have to deal with the second family, all of the stuff that comes with that scenario. And it just, like I said, just completely flipped my life upside down. So I had to build new friendships, figure out who I was. And being at the age of 12, I had to step into that, not dad's shoes, but I had to be a grown-up very early on, shall we say. Like my mum went off to do nursing at university because she wanted to start her own career. I ended up looking after my sister a lot, so I had to grow up very, very quickly. And that's probably my most vivid memory of being a child and then suddenly having to behave like an adult, shall we say.
What do you think you learnt from that? Well, like when you look back now, I know it felt difficult at the time, right?
Yeah.
What do you think you've taken from that?
I think that being my first experience, if that was just an isolation on its own, for me it was hard because you feel completely alone, right? Everyone's felt it when they're on their own, they feel just completely isolated. And that was probably the first feeling. But having experienced everything I've experienced since then, because that's not the worst thing that happened, I think it toughens you up a little bit. Now, I wouldn't wish it upon anyone. I wouldn't change it either. But I do think it toughens you a little bit. And I think that's a good thing. I think there's not enough of that in this world at the moment, that you just need to have a bit of grit and a bit of determination. And growing up that early is not something I'd necessarily say is okay. But I think it helped me shape the person I became today, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. I think when I was young, I had the perfect family life. Like my parents are still together now, traveling the world, and I think whilst that's great and whilst it's lovely, it was a real shock to the system when I had my own family, and I wasn't prepared for it. My partner, my wife, lost her mum when she was very young, so she had to kind of be the adult. She's the oldest sibling. She had to look after a, similar-ish story to what you're saying. And she was a lot more geared up. She was a lot more prepared. She's a lot more headstrong at an earlier age. And it's really, it's quite, I find it fascinating how something that at the time that feels so crushing can actually, really help you in a positive way years later. You don't realise it at the time, but years later.
And at the time, it feels like your world is imploding, and that's not the only thing that happened. I mean, we could spend hours talking about some of the stuff that happened over the years, but that was probably the most okay thing that happened. Versus as I grew up, I ended up having to move out and find a place to live on my own. I say I was homeless. I didn't end up on the street, but I had no home to go to, and I had to sleep in my mate's spare bedroom at his parents' house. I've then, my mum went on holiday to Australia and wouldn't allow me to stay in the house, and I had nowhere else to stay, and I slept in a shed for 4 weeks. Not even, I've got pictures and everything, I kid you not. And I used to shower at the David Lloyd in Hedge End every day, and I worked in a pub. So I'd go to work, come home, and I'd converted the shed into basically an outhouse. It was a relatively big shed, but I put a bed in there, a heater in there, completely converted it, because I wasn't allowed to stay in the house. So when you compare that to your parents breaking up and having to go to a new school, it's like here, right? Whereas compared to other issues I've faced in life, they're awful, and we can go into detail about them. But the point being is, it's not the challenge that defines us, but how we respond to them. And I don't know whether it was the good friendship group I was surrounded by. Certainly it wasn't family, but I was tough enough to deal with it. And I had a good network of friends around me that would kind of bring me up a little bit. Now, you do deal with it on your own, absolutely. But I think it's important to remember that if you've got good friends, they're there to support you morally, if you will. And it just changed something. I couldn't tell you what, but it just changed something. And it almost like everything I faced was like, I'm going to deal with this. And I think that really set me up for later on in life, and to become essentially a lot of what I talk about now.
So I'm assuming, you created friendship groups within the new area that you moved to.
Yes. Yeah.
And then you kind of, left school. You stayed in that area, did you?
Yeah, absolutely. I still live there now. So I moved to Bristol for a few years when I was 20, 21. But not for long. And then I came home after another thing that happened, shall we say. But yeah, I lived in Hedge End and still live there now. So I've got friends of 20 years plus that I still hang around with now, who I made friends with in the early part of year 7. So when I talk about adapting to change and challenge, I left behind everything I knew, but you make new friends.
Yeah.
And that's the part of saying, like, lean into problems and you'll be fine.
How did you do at school? Did that affect your school life, do you think?
It did in year 7 because I struggled to fit in. But after a little while, like once you build friendship groups, it just becomes normal life, right? I didn't do particularly well at school. I was average at best. I don't know what the reason for that was. It's not like I didn't enjoy it, but I wasn't a very confident kid at all. Like, I was not someone that would be very outspoken, sat at the back of the class, wouldn't raise my hand. Not that I wasn't necessarily smart enough to do the lesson, but not someone that would really outgoing, you know? And that's only changed recently in the last 6 or 7 years, I would say. The content I put out now is not anything I would have done back in 2019, 2018. So.
What do you think changed?
I couldn't pinpoint one thing. I think it's again, it's going to sound really cliche, but this constant lesson in failure, right? So you fail, and you're not the fear of failing is not what gets you, right? Alex Hormozy said, fear is a mile wide but only an inch deep, right? When you step in it, it doesn't exist. It's the fear of opinion. And at some point, when you do it often enough and you get those opinions and you get the hate that I was talking about, haters and things like that, it's eventually you just become numb to it. Eventually you just go, okay, whatever. Because they're not doing what you're doing. And you'll find that the more people you surround yourself with that want to bring you up, the easier it becomes. So if people just don't want to bring you up and they're trying to tear you down, just don't hang around with them. It really is that simple. And you get all these philosophical people talking on other podcasts about how, change your mindset or do this or do that. And you can, but if you surround yourself with good people, naturally you'll be drawn towards good vibes, right? And I think that's what changed for me and also the successes that I experienced is like, okay, I must be doing something right because look what I've done with my brand. Look where I've achieved. I won the Theo Pafitas Small Business Sunday. So you can take the mick out of me all you want, but look what I'm doing. So not necessarily you need affirmations from people, but it helps. And
then when you left school then, did you go into college?
Yes.
Straight into work?
Straight into college. I had a job at a pub as a sous chef, and I went straight into college and studied aerospace engineering, which I was really proud to do. I really enjoyed it, really enjoyed taking apart the aircraft and learning it. And it was a 3-year course, but towards the end I sort of gave up and I didn't finish it in the end. I remember distinctly one story, me and my friends down on Hamble River, and we were jumping in and enjoying the sun, and we got a text message saying that you hadn't turned up to your basically last exam. We're like, oops. And I don't know why. I guess I was just enjoying having money and working and having that freedom that I'd never really experienced as a kid because I had to grow up so quick and look after my sister. I'd never had those experiences, so I just went mad on it when I became an adult and actually could have money and that kind of thing. So I never finished it. And then when I came out of what was college at the time, I just went straight into work. And that's when I moved to Bristol. So.
What was the job that you took?
Just a bog standard sales job. So I worked in a sales office up in Bristol, which was, well, I say that. I used to do door-to-door fundraising for charities. That'll toughen you up. If you ever want to get into sales, do that first because nothing will touch you. And I think that probably played a part in my mindset now is that you get yelled at by people at the front door. Eventually you just become numb to it. But I went up to Bristol to do that because there was a job offering up there. And I had nowhere to live, had no flat, no nothing. So I'd sleep on my mate's student floor. And I'd top and tail with my other mate in her student halls until I could afford something. And then I managed to get a job in a sales office in Bristol. And that was where my first proper job came from. I worked in a proper company with proper management and proper pay. And that's really where I started to build my life. And I worked for a very, very good boss at the time who I can single-handedly say really started me off on the right journey to be the right person. So a really quick story on that was I was expecting my first child when I lived in Bristol. And I had to take 2 buses. It took me about an hour to get to work every day. And he said to me, you can't do that because you won't be around. So he said, how do you feel about getting a motorbike license? It's in like a 125, little pop. And I said, well, I can't afford it. And he bought me a bike, paid for all my kit and paid for my license. And then just said, we'll deduct it from your salary. Whatever you can afford, we'll deduct it. And that was my first experience of someone who you need in a situation that you really need, really showing up for you. And a lot of those experiences who I've had in multiple roles over the years have really imprinted on me, and that's what I try and do now. So sometimes good, sometimes bad. I do help too many people probably, but I think that's a good trait, and I've certainly learnt that from people who helped me over the years as well.
Must be quite a big thing going from door-to-door sales where, I mean, what was that, like 99% rejection rate?
Yeah, maybe more.
And
Close
then,
to 100.
Yeah. And then going into a job with a boss that's that, kind of, that must have been quite a big culture shock.
It's worlds apart, but I know we say the best way to grow is to be uncomfortable, but every now and then you need a bit of comfort. Every now and then you need someone to just go, I've got your back.
Yeah.
And that was that first moment, I think, for a very, very long time. And it definitely helped shape who I grew to be over those years. And it just, not that there was any security there. It wasn't going to have my back the whole time. I still had to do my job. But just knowing that someone was there to go, okay, you're in a situation, I have the ability to help you. Let me help you. And I talk a lot about that now. I'm 32, and I always say to people, if you have the ability to help someone, and you can, you should. And that has been learnt from perhaps that experience. So it was a culture shock, to be fair. I had to learn how to go from being yelled at and chased down the street to being a proper professional salesperson in an office and picking up the phone and using a computer and that sort of stuff.
Do you think that the charity job, do you think that helped you? Do you think you learned
100%.
a lot from that?
Absolutely, yeah. When you're in sales, whether it's building a brand or working for a company, right, rejection is a big thing. And a lot of people struggle with it. A lot of people don't know how to handle people saying no. They do this whole objection handling thing. And it's difficult. You think you're great at what you do until someone says, no, I'm not interested. And you tend to hang on to it too much. You tend to be like, why are you not interested? And you force it. But being charity door fundraiser meant that you could just let it go. It's not for everyone. And I think that's what's interesting about my brand now is I create clothing, I create designs, but I recognise it's not for everyone. Some people are going to buy other stuff. Some people aren't going to like what I like. That's okay. There's like 7 billion people on the planet. Not everyone's going to like what you do. And I think that taught me that, to be like, okay, you can't please everybody you meet. Equally, I had some good experiences. It wasn't all bad. I've had dinner in people's homes. I've sat watching TV with them while I signed them up. So they were rare, don't get me wrong. But that, and again, restores faith in humanity that you will eventually get the yes if you keep doing what you believe in. And the way that they used to teach you to do door-to-door fundraising was very American, very salesy. Like you had a pitch, you had to do different parts of it, you had to compare it to like the price of milk every week. And I kept pushing back, like, I'm not doing that. I'm going to give you me at the door. How would I want to be talked to? And I've always stuck to that. And I think that's really helped me later on because we talk about authenticity, right? Everything you get now is just me. I'm not putting this on for your podcast. This is me. And I think that long term, it makes you better off. Gets people to buy into you. So.
Did you enjoy the job?
Yeah, on the warmer days, yeah. On the warmer days. I mean, in the winter, you're knocking doors from, say, 3 until 8, 9 o'clock at night. And in the summer, that's great. In the winter, when you're knocking on someone's door at 7 and it's pitch black and they've got kids, you're getting yelled at. So it definitely helped me learn more around sales and just general engagement with the public. Did I enjoy it? It paid well. I'm not sure how the charities made any money because we were raking it in terms of, for that age, we were definitely taking a lot of money. Really? And you got a bonus for every sign up. So yeah, very strange, but it was okay. It wasn't a bad job. Certainly not the worst one I've had.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because, just thinking back to, what you're saying about being a young lad and being kind of chucked in the deep end and put into these situations where, you've got to find a way out. There's not many people that would throw themselves into a job like that, I don't think.
No, it's a unique role where there has to be a little bit of pizzazz about you, right? Like you have to want to try, and they do something called role play. So anytime you do this, you have to do role play, and it's the most awkward thing in the world because you've got to stand there in a room full of people pretending to knock on their door, and it's just awkward. But by putting yourself in uncomfortable situations, you learn more. And it's so cheesy to say, but it's so true. And that's happened to me with every job I had thereafter. They would encourage me to put myself in uncomfortable situations, so I learned better. I mean, the job I had after that, when I moved back home in 2016, I worked for a business in Hedge End, and I'm going to say his name because he's an absolute legend, but Craig Parker was my manager at the time. And I was not a public speaker, right? I didn't like stand up, I didn't like doing presentations. Knocking on the door is fine. It's one-on-one. If they yell at you, you leave. It's very enclosed. But in this role, I had to present to senior members of the team, and I went on a management course, and at the end, you had to do a presentation to the entire room. There was like 50 people. And I was absolutely breaking it. I was like, I don't want to do this. And he said, just do it. I said, I promise you, you'll feel better when you come out the other side, because even if you get it wrong, it's an experience. I won best presentation.
Wow.
How? I'll never know, because I didn't think it was that good. I won best presentation. And since that day forward, I've built confidence on public speaking and talking and being able to come out and do that more. And that one single moment where he forced me to do it completely changed who I was. Had I not done it, there's no chance I'd have come here and talked to you. There's no chance I'd be speaking to students the week after next. So you have to put yourself in those situations to kind of overcome it. Although it feels completely unnatural to do so at the time.
It feels it's a strange one. I've been in a similar situation. You get that really kind of knot in your stomach, and you'd really rather not do it.
You can feel yourself going redder and redder, and sweaty palms and that kind of stuff.
But you're absolutely right. Once you've done it, and you kind of step off the stage or you step out of the room, there's kind of that. It's more than relief, isn't it? It's like,
I finished it.
I just did that,
Yeah.
and that actually went all right, you know. And you're right, yeah. It really does spur you to do a bit more.
The hardest part is to do it, right? The hardest part isn't doing it. The hardest part isn't the end. The hardest part is convincing yourself to start.
Yeah.
And once you get going, you tend to get yourself in a flow, and it just comes out and it happens. So what if you make a mistake? It's the whole part of learning, right? And anyone in the room that you're presenting to that tries to bring you down probably don't have the confidence to do it themselves. And I think the sooner you realise that that's just the way people are in life, the sooner you can just go, oh, never mind. What are they like? You are the master of your own world, right?
Yeah. It's the same with a lot of stuff as well, isn't it? The thought of doing something is actually more difficult than doing it.
The doing the thing.
You know, like I use this all the time with my children. The heaviest weight in a gym is the front door. You know, like getting through
100%.
that front door is the hardest part. Once you're in there, you're in there.
I have that feeling every day. We talked about this on the way up, about I never really want to go to the gym. I do, deep down, but the thought of getting up, getting my pre-workout in, particularly late at night when I train, driving all the way to the gym, getting in the gym, getting warmed up, I'm like, oh, here we go. Second I walk through that door, it's game on.
Yeah,
I'm ready for the gym. But if I hadn't gone, then I wouldn't get fit and I wouldn't do all those things. So you just got to do that little hard bit first, and the rest, it's not easy, but it's easier.
Similarly, once you've finished in the gym, that feeling of it's done, you know, it's quite euphoric, isn't it?
Absolutely.
You know, and it's the same thing with public speaking. You step off the stage.
There is a sense of, I don't know if imposter syndrome is the right word, but when you get the opportunity to do that, particularly if it's your first couple of goes, it feels weird because you're like, should I be doing this? And that's where the lack of confidence comes from a lot of the time, is that you feel like you're not the right person to be doing it. But that's where you just got to take a deep breath and go, okay, I'm going to go out and say what I know. And I think that's where authenticity comes in, because you can't get it wrong, right? The stories I'm telling you now are not made up. They're just my life. So I can't get it wrong. And that as soon as you realise that, you can overcome so much anxiety. And confidence is earned, right? You're not born with confidence. No one's born with confidence. Confidence comes from putting yourself in uncomfortable situations, trying, and eventually you go, okay, I can do this. And that's what builds your confidence. So by choosing not to do it, you're never going to get there. And I think that's people miss. It's like, if you don't do it, it's never going to change.
Yeah, really interesting. Have you ever been in a situation where you've not done it and regretted it?
More recently, so no, but certainly in the early years of the brand, definitely. There were opportunities where I could have gone to shows and done certain things, not so much from a public speaking perspective, but definitely been part of stuff where I felt like I wasn't as confident in me and the brand as possible. Like when you're behind a computer screen, you're pumping out content, that's easy. When you've got to go and do it publicly and stand by your product, it's a little bit harder.
Yeah.
Now, I believe in the product, I believe in the designs, but to put yourself out there like that, particularly in an industry that's so full of products and so full of different companies starting every day, it's a very difficult place to put yourself, because you are completely open to opinion, right? And that doesn't come from the fear of actually being out there. That comes from the fear of opinion from others. And the second you can get over that fear of opinion from others, you're almost unstoppable. Because opinions aren't a bad thing. If someone has an opinion of my product, for example, and says, I hate your t-shirt, and then doesn't finish that conversation, it's like, well, I'm not going to take that because that's nothing.
Yeah.
If someone says, I hate your t-shirt because, yeah, it's not a nice comment to hear, but you learned something, right? You can now adapt. Now, if it's something you can change, great. If it's not, let it go.
So how have you kind of dealt with that in the past then? So, I mean, you put out an awful lot of content. Do you get people that are detrimental to that content?
All the time. Behind the scenes, usually. When it first started, when I first did what was the original brand in 2019, I used to get text messages off some friends, some acquaintances, like, oh, do you want to be the next content creator? And it did hurt. You're kind of like, no, I'm just trying to build my brand. But like I said, the more often you experience this, the more numb you become to it and go, do you know what? No, this is what I want to do. I know I'm doing the right thing and I believe in it. That's why it's so important. I came up with a quote, and the first part of it is find a reason why. And my reason why was strong enough that it was like, yeah, it's not nice, but I'm going to do it anyway. And the more success you have in that particular space, whether it's being content creator or whether it's, you know, selling clothing or the Theo Paphitas thing we won, the more confidence you get, the less you tend to listen. Like I said, haters aren't a bad thing. But yeah, I get it all the time. I even get it now sometimes with people saying, oh, you're never going to be this, you're never going to amount to anything. And I've managed to switch it off a little bit. It's still not nice. Like, I'm not completely immune to it. And I don't think anybody will ever be completely immune to it. But you just find better ways to handle it.
Yeah. It comes from people that you know as well, right?
Yeah.
Which is
often it comes from the closest people who you don't expect it from. And this is the thing that's quite unanimous with other founders I've met along the years, that those of you who are closest to you tend to be the biggest doubters because they've only ever known you as something else. But as soon as you realise they only ever known you as the guy that works in this job and the guy that does that, and you're trying something new, the more you can switch off to it because you're like, well, this is what I want to do now. Arguably, it's not everybody close to me. I've got some very, very supportive friends and very, very supportive people around me. But there are people that will bring you down who you least expect to bring you down, who will make nasty comments about it and be like, it's just not for you. And I think for me, the biggest driver is just to prove them wrong. And I don't have to do it in a nasty way. I don't have to be like, look what I did. I just go off and do the things I do. Yeah. I mean, the best example is the Theo Paphitas thing, right? So when I first started the brand, we didn't win straight away. And people were just mocking me all the time, like, it's never going to amount to anything. You're not going to be Gymshark. You're not going to be this. What are you trying to be, the next Nike? And yeah, it was tough. But I just kept my head down and kept working. And there were some ambassadors early on that came and joined the brand that joined it because they thought we were going to be an overnight success, which is almost never heard of, right? And then left within a few weeks because they thought, oh, well, this isn't going to amount to anything. The second I put a picture up of me stood next to Theo, everybody was like, oh, I knew you could do it. I was like, oh, did you know?
Yeah.
But the best thing to do is not react and go, whatever, you didn't support me. It's just to keep doing what you're doing. Because the mere success and the proving them wrong is enough. Just leave them behind. And that's fine. Like I said, it's not for everyone.
Yeah. It's mad, isn't it, how people, you know, I've never quite got my head around it. But, you know, is it banterous? Well,
Sometimes.
I mean, yeah, sometimes it is. But do you feel like when you're on the other end of it, do you feel like there's an element of seriousness to that? Because otherwise, you know, why would it? Sometimes it has come from closer friends, but I know it's banter. And to be honest with you, the way that we tear each other apart, it wouldn't surprise me if it was banter. Sometimes you don't want to hear it, even when it is banter, because you might be so deep into trying to make it work, and it can be really, really hard that you need support at that time. You don't need grief. But again, you know it's coming from friends. They tend to switch off. It's those who mean it that you just kind of go, oh, okay. Like I said, if it gets said so many times, eventually you just switch off to it, right? Like the boy who cried wolf. It just happened and happened. He's just, oh, whatever, not interested. And often, and certainly I found this from experiences, almost all of the time, and I'm yet to come across a time where it hasn't, those who are saying those things have either never amounted anything to themselves, never tried, never pushed, been very bog standard, or would never have the confidence to do it themselves. And as soon as you recognise that in people, you go, well, you're not even bold enough to try this. So who are you to say that I can't do it? Yeah.
You know, and you'll never, ever, ever find someone who's doing better than you in whatever field bring you down. They're always the ones bringing you up.
So true. So true. Yeah, I think it's really, it's difficult to comprehend, right? But I think when you actually step away from the situation and look at it from a different perspective, I think you're absolutely right. I think, why are these people attacking you? Well, surely that's got to be a compliment, right? Because if you weren't doing something that was raising attention or making waves, people would just ignore it. So I guess it's just how you kind of perceive that kind of attention, I guess.
Sometimes it's good attention. Sometimes it's really positive, which I equally struggle with. It's probably one of my flaws is that when people compliment me, I tend to recoil a little bit. I'm like, oh, okay. Because I don't do it for that. I don't do it for the compliments. You know, not often, and I'm certainly by no means famous, but I've been asked for a picture a few times, which is really cool. And we take pictures of the products, which is really lovely. But but I also feel really uneasy in those situations. It's lovely and it's very complimentary, but I'm like, oh, it's a bit odd. And it's something I need to get used to more, as people going, actually, I really like this stuff. But I think that comes from the fact that 90% of the time, you're just getting hammered with bad comments. So to adjust to it being a positive is quite difficult. But when it comes to the negative stuff, like I say, you just have to tune out, because there's only one or two things that are happening. Either they're just being bitter about it because they've seen you succeed and they can't do it, or mainly they wouldn't even bother trying. Or they're just, it takes energy to give someone hate, right? If you comment on someone's post, it takes time and energy to do that.
Yeah.
That is more of, again, very cliche, but it's more of a reflection on their state of mind than it is yours.
Totally.
Because, like, why are you so angry? I don't know you. You don't know me. What makes you so angry? You have no idea who I am. So it's like, well, you just do you. And you'll get it. Social media is the worst place for it, right? Any piece of content that you put out. There was a video that, have you seen Ben Carpenter?
No.
He's a really big fitness guru. I think he lives in the States now. Well worth following. And there was this lady who was slightly overweight, made a video of her doing ballet. And she was really proud of it. The amount of hate that was on that message. And like, she wasn't doing it to show off her fitness and physique. She was doing it because she likes ballet, because she was just showing the piece of content she liked. But the energy that went into hating on that video was nuts. And I always just think, why? I get we don't live in a pink and fluffy and lovely world, right? It's a very difficult place to live in on our planet, but there's no need for that sort of stuff. And I think the second you kind of go, if you put it in that reality box, right, you just go, oh, it's just people being people, right?
Yeah.
Don't let it bother you.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Because I think, like you say, that takes time and energy, and people must be
Always.
They must.
If you don't like something, move on.
Yeah, exactly.
It's when like people put unfollow, like it means anything.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you think? You're
So,
the King of England? Like,
yeah, exactly.
No one cares.
Yeah, it's crazy. But I mean, yeah, like I say, I think it's, once you get to that stage, you start to get people that are hating, then you're doing something right.
In theory, yes, and there is an element of that. If people are really hating on you and you're pushing about it, as long as you're not doing anything controversial, because we talk a lot about sometimes the only way to get famous now on social media is to be an idiot, right? And I genuinely think that the vast majority of the content that's coming out now on social media, in any forum, whether it's fitness or otherwise, is people laughing at people, not with people. That's what content's really about. Or people tearing other people down because they said something stupid on a video, and it's just getting really boring. Yeah. And I'm not stooping to that level at all. I think we just put out what we want to put out. We put out what we think is right. If we need to call people out, but do it in an informational way, I think that's okay. But just tearing each other down through videos is just pointless.
Yeah,
Again, takes energy, and I think it's a limited amount of content you can put out in that space, because all you're doing is attacking other people that have said something.
Yeah.
You don't actually achieve anything. If anything, I tune out to that sort of stuff, because I think, oh, here we go again.
Yeah.
It just gets boring after a while.
And you're not representing yourself very well by doing that.
You look bitter.
Yeah,
that's all it is. You look bitter. Right. I'm not as big as Gymshark and Adidas, right? That's very clear. But I don't go out there slating their product.
No.
I think they've got a good product. I don't necessarily agree with the way they market their product. But who am I to say? It's up to them. There's thousands and thousands of brands out there. Hundreds of thousands of brands. So rather than focusing on what they're doing, why don't you just focus on what you think is best for your brand?
Yeah.
Instead of worrying about what the competition's doing.
Yeah, I agree. So going from your first bit of public speaking in your job in Hedge End, how did you go from there to thinking about starting up your own gym wear brand, to then actually kind of going ahead and doing it, and like talk me through that process?
Yeah, so I worked in that job in 2019. It was kind of when I came to the end, and the end of 2018 was when I started to fall ill, which we know the story about me becoming quite unwell, and I lost a lot of weight, and I'll spare your listeners and viewers the gorier details, because there are many, but I had symptoms that were pretty horrific, and I let it go on for a very, very long time, and I actually had to have time off work because of it, and I lost a huge amount of weight. And then in April 2019, the day after my birthday, actually, my wife staged an intervention and said, you need to take yourself to hospital. So I did, and I remember texting her that night from triage saying, this is ridiculous, I'll be home by midnight. They kept me for a week. So kept me for a week, put me in isolation, and gave me a concoction of drugs that your local mixologist would be proud of, all kinds of different things. And then I got diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, and that is the beginning of the brand, because I was just everyday worker, doing my job, when I say public speaking, I was doing it in a work sense. It wasn't for my own personal gain. It wasn't because I felt like I could do it. It was just because I had to. And then when I felt ill, I had a bit of time off. Now, the presentation I'm doing to the students in a couple of weeks is all about the fact that fitness came first. I didn't just wake up one day and go, oh, that t-shirt looks good, let's stick a logo on it and see what happens. I actually started my journey in my back garden, which I can only describe as a gym built by Face Bay and Argos on my local decking, just a little bit of decking. And I had to build myself back up from 60 kilos, pure exhaustion, couldn't lift myself out of a chair without feeling tired, and just get myself back into that world of health and fitness and add a bit more weight on me. And that's really where the brand started from, because I recognised that although there are lots of big brands in the industry, they all tend to focus on, we talk about goals and ends and achievements, the success of fitness, having a six-pack, looking buff. That at that time, that's all it was focused on. Athletes within like Adidas and Nike, who they sponsored, all those that's all it was. Well, actually, most of the journey in fitness is the journey, right? You're never really finished. You might be a runner. I'm not a runner. I'm a lifter. Some people might be into swimming. All of it is fitness. And because I was living that journey, and I did art at school, and I was being quite creative and had that technical mind when I was in college, I thought, oh, maybe I'll just create some stuff. And that's all it was. It was just an idea to go, oh, I might make some of my own t-shirts because I quite like the gym. I quite like clothing. Let's see how it turns out. And then when I launched the first few, people bought them. And I was like, oh, this is weird. And it is it feels very, very weird when someone buys your product for the first time.
Yeah, I bet.
Because you want people to. And then when they do, you're like, why are you buying my product?
It's almost like that recognition, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's created the brand out of that. And then it just sort of took off from there, to be honest. It was a very weird experience for the first year and a half. At the time, I'd owned another business. I say a business, I can't remember. It was a bit of a tin pot kind of. We're basically selling products like Boohoo. It was like a boutique that me and my wife decided we were just going to see if we could do. I started selling the product through that, and then that took over the entire business that was at the time. And then it became, what was the name at the time? Savage Gymwear. So obviously we changed the name. No fancy story behind that name, unfortunately. It was an urban slang term that one of my friends had used to describe my symptoms. She said, oh, that's savage, and it stuck. So we called it Savage Gymwear. And it was just promoting that journey of fitness. And then we went on to win the Theo Pafitas Small Business Sunday. It seemed like everything we touched turned to gold at the time, albeit very expensively so. And my life just sort of changed within 6 months, I guess.
So were you much of a gym goer before you fell ill?
Yes, absolutely. But I never breached beyond 70 kilos. I was a very slim gym goer, shall we say, primarily into my cardio and that sort of stuff. I wouldn't say I was regular in the gym as I am now at that time, but I certainly enjoyed fitness. I had a membership. But when I started to feel ill, I gave up on all of that because I just couldn't handle it. Hunched over most days, extreme stomach pain, completely debilitating in a lot of cases. And anyone who suffers from Crohn's or ulcerative colitis will tell you it can be massively debilitating. So although I had previous experience of being in the gym, I really had to find myself again. This was almost like a starting from day one.
How long did the illness last in the end? Like from point of, I've got to stop, to going through hospital treatment and then coming out the other side? Like, what was that time period?
Well, I suffered with symptoms for about 8 months.
Blimey.
Yeah, and it got worse and worse and worse. To the point where I ended up in hospital sometimes. I went to the GP a number of times. They missed it. They didn't know what it was. So about 8 months of symptoms progressively getting worse. And I said on my day after my birthday in April 2019, I went to hospital. I came out of hospital within a week, but then I had all sorts of visits thereafter. I had to have infusions for immune suppressant drug, which I still take to this day. It's chronic, right? It's not curable. I'm stuck with it for life. It's more manageable now. I have like a little pen like you do with insulin that I take every 2 weeks. But at the time I was in for 3-4 hours worth of infusions every month, getting poked, prodded and tested all the time. All whilst trying to build my fitness back up. So you kind of go forward a little bit, come back, come forward a little bit. And then I managed to gain from what was, I think, 62 kilos when I came out of hospital. I'm now 90, and that was kind of my peak. I did that in about 6 months because I was eating 4,500 calories a day, training 6 days a week. I didn't miss a beat with the gym. I basically lived in my garden gym between working hours, and that was it. Just trained and trained and trained and trained and trained.
Where did the motivation come from for that?
Being a skinny bag of bones and realising that I used to be fit was kind of the first bit. And I've got kids. I couldn't even pick my son up at the time who was young. I couldn't pick him up without being tired. I couldn't walk the stairs without being tired. I just felt like an old, decrepit man. And not that that's necessarily like a status of a man, but more just like, I can't do anything. And coming from a relatively fit background of mountain biking, mountain boarding, I was like, I can't live like this. I need to do something about it. And then the more I looked into the fitness industry and the more I've always been buying clothes from like the Adidas and the Gymsharks. And I was like, that's really, let's say you're not born with a passion, you find it. And I think that's where I found it. And I just started to design, and it kind of just happened. There was no spectacular story around. I just saw a product from abroad and bought it and put my logo on it. I just discovered it as I went on. And then when people started to show interest in my journey, as well as the product, it snowballed and just became what it is today. I think the biggest thing was when we won the Theo Perfectus Award. Because what you do is when you enter, you have to tell your story. And he wants to hear from brands why they began, what they're about, what their ethos is. And everything I've just told you around my journey of fitness was that. And I entered it the first time, and I didn't win because I wrote some really long speech about it, and it was too much. The second time I went to the gym, and I said to my wife, I was like, can you just do it? Because you'll probably condense it. And I was in the gym, and I got a notification that said, Theo's retweeted like your brand. Nearly fell off my perch. I was like, what? And we'd won. And I don't quote me on it because I have looked at the list, but I think we were one of the first, if not the first, fitness apparel brand to win the SBS Sunday Award. Wow. So it was really cool, got to meet him. And that for me was the real solidification of, do you know what, maybe I'm doing the right thing here. People are buying it, people like it, the story is true and it resonates. And someone like that picks up on it and goes, I like that, that's cool. Kind of set the stage for me a little bit.
How old was the brand?
About a year and a half.
Blimey.
Yeah. We weren't even that established, to be honest. So you got to think, someone like that retweeting your brand, it was just a garden idea from something you faced yourself and you really wanted to change how the industry looked at fitness. And someone of that caliber goes, I like what you're doing. I'm going to give you this award. I was like, okay, cool. And I still live off that a little bit now. I don't need affirmations to tell me I'm doing a good job, but every now and then stuff like that helps.
Yeah.
A long way.
So what was it like meeting him?
Surreal. So you go into, he does an event every year, basically. You go, and we watched him and Tuka do like a fireside chat. There's loads of business, all the businesses that are in the room. They put on this really great event, food, drinks, everything, and you just get to listen to talks all day long. It's a very business orientated event, but it's not the boring kind. It's very, innovative, and you listen and you kind of learn from all the masters in the room. And then at the end, you get to collect your certificate and like shake his hand and meet him. And we exchanged a few words, but just to be face to face with someone that you've seen on BBC Dragon's Den, who is, he owns DHL and Robert Dyers. He knows his stuff.
Big deal.
For him to go, great job. It's a big deal. It is a big deal. I haven't met him since. I don't have him on my phone or anything like that. It's not that big, but it's just every now and then he's doing what I experienced with my old boss. Remember back in Bristol, is he's looking at people going, you're doing something good. I know I've got the status to be able to bring you up, so I'm going to bring you up. And that's rare, I think, but it has a massive, massive impact.
How did it affect the brand?
It certainly got attention. There's no mistaking, you get a picture next to someone like that and you put it on your socials, people pay attention. You obviously had the haters that were like, suddenly came out of the woodwork, oh, I knew you could do it. Yeah, all right, mate, thank you very much. But it made people take us a bit more seriously. I think when you're sitting, even in a forum like this, having not had all the experiences that we've had, not lived through everything that I've lived through, not done all the things that we've done, to have someone like that, people just look at you and go, oh, okay, they must be real. Whether that's right or wrong, I disagree with the sentiment, but it made people pay more attention to who we were. And I think I didn't see sales affected too much, but I definitely saw engagement. People pay more attention to who and what we were.
Nice. So where did in this journey of, you kind of go through this horrendous illness, you come up with the idea of the brands, you win this award. How do you then get into the social side of things? Like what was it that kind of spurred that on?
In terms of like Instagram and social media, just everyone's doing it, right? I think the trend at the time was that all brands were on social media, and that's where it is part of the learning curve, right? I used to think, set up a website, happy days, everything's done. So naive at the time. But social media is where you can really share your story. And you think Instagram at the beginning always used to be about images and photos, and that's how you got engagement. So I was like, well, maybe I need to share not just my journey, but the products on Instagram. If you looked, and you can't see it because I've deleted all the old stuff, but if you looked at my Instagram from day one, horrendous, like really horrendous. But you watch other brands and you absorb content that's of your arena, and you start to pick up what kind of works and what doesn't work. And it's still authentic from our perspective, but the kind of vibe that we want to put out and the way that we produce our content. And it's just, I just started it and kind of learned as I went along. There was no particular plan. Everyone's like, I had this business plan. I didn't. It was just see what we could do, see what we could find out along the way. And I'd say only recently, since we rebranded to Gymbuck Athletics, a little over a year and a half ago, that our page has only really just turned into a proper gym wear page. It looks the part. It really illustrates what we want to illustrate. But that was only from just posting and finding out. The best thing about this, and I say this to all my ambassadors, when you're creating content, very much in the social media space, if you post it and it's not quite what you thought, delete it. They put so much pressure on themselves to create a great piece of content like they're some sort of movie star. Create, post. If it doesn't work, delete it. And that's a lot of what we did in the early days of just practicing. But today, I would say 95% of our sales and everything we do with the brand is done through Instagram. That's where all of it comes from. That's how they discover us.
What drove the rebrand, the name change?
I got sued.
Oh, that'll do it.
Yeah. I'm not sure how much of this I can share without getting myself sued again, so I'll be very careful. Basically, the first thing that happened, I brought out a running vest. I can't remember what year it was, but I brought out a running vest. You know Free Train, who do the running phone vests? Yeah. Something similar to that. Now, loads and loads of people sell those across the market. They are the leader, by no means absolutely the leader. But we were going to the NEC to do a national running show, very, very expensive show, and we brought in some running products to support that. I was like, we need an accessory. So I'd purposely gone to abroad suppliers, looked at what they did, and designed something that was the same, but there were so many variations that were different because we wanted to be unique and not really go into that market. So I brought something in. I think within a month or two of selling it, we got a legal letter from them saying that we had to cease and desist, all this kind of stuff. So that was my first brush with being sued. In the end, we won. But a little nugget for you, when we went to the NEC, one of their founders picked a fight with me. Came up to my stand, got in my face and picked a fight with me because of that particular product.
No
I'm
way.
one of hundreds of people that were selling it, but yeah, he picked a fight with me. Security came and everything. So that was my first brush with probably the legal side of, the harder side of building a brand, not just the fun stuff that you see on social media. But the one that really got me was a few months after that, we received a letter from some random guy based in London with the last name Savage. For legal reasons, I can't tell you much more than that, but and he basically copyrighted or trademarked it in like 1999, and he said I wasn't allowed to use it on my products. So originally I wrote back saying that's ridiculous. We have a completely different business to you. We're not competing with you in the same space. You're just doing it because you got the trademark. And then for a period of time after that, I managed to continue selling, and I logged on one day to fulfill my orders, and Shopify had shut my store down. Completely just, there was nothing there. And I got an email from them saying if I don't remove all the products that infringe on the trademark, then I won't get my store reopened. And it was basically everything I sold, including my domain name. So I've gone from this wonderful height to like, where's my business gone? And then I fought it again, and I got it reopened. I changed the domain name to SVG Gymwear and just redirected everything. So I still own the domain today. Maybe that's a bit of a nasty thing to do, but I'm not getting rid of it. And then it was fine for a couple of weeks, and then I logged on again. My store was shut down again. This happened 4 times. And I'd paid solicitors to help me fight it, gone back with all kinds of legal letters, and it was just costing me a fortune. And you know the expression, death by 1,000 cuts? It was getting to the point where I was like, I'm just going to run out of money and I'll have no brand. And on the 4th time, I didn't bother fighting it. And I remember talking to a friend of mine based up in the north, and I was saying, like, this is it. Like, this is the end of my brand. And I got so absorbed with what the brand had become, not where it had come from, that I genuinely thought, like, I'm going to have to shut the brand. Like, it's done. It's finished. We've had a good stint. It's over. I can't win this. Whether I fight him financially or not, which would have cost me tens of thousands of pounds, or I keep doing it for solicitors, I'm going to run out of money. And I was in a bit of a tizzy about it, to be fair. It was probably one of the few times over the last couple of years that it really got to me. And I'd kind of, all that stuff I just told you about leaning into stuff, it just, it's all my hard work, all my money's gone into it, completely down the drain. And he turned around to me and he said something really profound. He goes, Jay, he said, the name isn't the brand, you are. And I was like, oh yeah. And it just re-grounded me a little bit, and then we rebranded. And I can confidently say in the last year and a half of being Gymbuck Athletics, we have done tenfold in every area that we ever did. is Savage Gymwear. Because we hit the vibe, we hit it right. You know, every cloud has a silver lining, all that rubbish. It just, sometimes these things happen for a reason. And it's been better than it's ever been. And I'm almost glad it happened. So,
mental, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you think
Stressful.
how many brands would have just
Folded.
ceased to exist?
Yeah.
They would have just gone and disappeared.
That's why I say sometimes it's worth the fight. If you believe in it enough and your reason is strong enough, lean into it. What's the worst that can happen? You lose, and then it's done, isn't it? But we won, essentially. Right.
What do you think you would have done? Like, did you go through a thought process of, I've got to shut the brand down, what am I going to do next?
It didn't really occur to me what I was going to do next, but more just the somber, like, oh, this is the end. And bear in mind, the NEC cost me $7,000 to be there. That was only 6 months before. That was one of many shows.
And that was the trigger.
Yeah, and that was the trigger that finally shut us down. But for me, it was more focusing on too much of like, this is the end. And I didn't really have a plan for what was next. I was just upset that was the end. And like I said, it wasn't until that comment that it re-grounded me. And I was like, actually, although the brand was representing the ethos of where we'd come from in my journey, I wasn't. So it re-centered me, and I was like, oh yes, back to basics. Let's get it going.
So you just literally...
Everything had to change. It wasn't easy. Bear in mind, the domain names had to change, the website had to change, all the products had to change, all the prints had to change. I still have loads of Savage Gymwear products I can't sell, sat in a box at home. So I have to use them for painting or something now. But everything had to change. My limited company had to change. The way I do my VAT had to change. All of the brand deals I had to change. Arguably, I got more out of it, but it wasn't just a case of, we'll just change the name. There was a lot that went into it. Did
you lose any relationships over it?
Surprisingly not. So I was worried. I had a team of ambassadors at the time, and a lot of those are still here today. I think one of the surprising things for me was, okay, we're going to rebrand. So I've gotten over the fact that I'm now going to have to shut the business, but now we're going to rebrand. What impact is that going to have on those that believed in who we are? So I was really careful with the message, like, our brand hasn't changed. Who we are hasn't changed. It's just the name. That's all we're doing. And everyone was actually really excited about it. Everyone was like, oh, this is great. You know, really nice to see you adapt to it and change. And some people even said, oh, I prefer the new name. I wasn't sure whether to be offended or not, to be honest, but it was way more positive than I could have ever hoped. We didn't lose anyone. We didn't lose any deals. If anything, we gained better than we ever had. So sometimes when I talk about leaning into it, don't be afraid of what's to come, because you might find it's completely the opposite. We create stories in our own head of what it's going to be like, but we haven't got that yet, right? So sometimes change the narrative and go, okay, whatever will be, but I believe in it enough to make it happen. And everyone was great. I don't know why it surprised me. I don't mean that in a bad way, but it was a nice surprise.
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? Because, you know, you kind of spend so much energy, so much time, money, building this, building this thing, and I suppose it feels really alien to then have to completely change the whole, you know, the look, I guess.
Yeah.
The logos, the lot. You're kind of almost, you know, screwing it up and starting again.
Essentially, yeah, and the branding part of it's very difficult, because you feel like you've hit a vibe with what you've got, and then you have to completely change. But arguably, the brand vibe with Savage was limited. The logo is limited to where we could put it. When you're printing clothes, you just assume you can print it anywhere, but some places look ridiculous. And depending on the logo size and how you position it, it looked ridiculous. And I felt like we were getting to that with Savage. When I look back on it, I was like, oh, we can only print it so many ways. Whereas with Gymbuck and our logo, there's so many different designs we can come up with. And as part of that rebrand, it allowed us to do things that we wanted to change in the Savage era without making it look like we were changing too often. So we could just completely overhaul and do all the changes we wanted to do from day one, because we were rebranding, and make it exactly what we wanted it to be. And when it started, when I sat back and everything was kind of ticking along as it was previously, I looked at it and goes, this is what the brand should have looked like from day one.
Yeah.
I feel like I'd done it for 3.5 years or whatever, but it was day one again, but with 3 years experience.
That must be a really good feeling, though.
It was, yeah, absolutely. It felt like it had paid off. You know, when people say you've got to put the time and hard work in, few people really understand what hard work means. It's not just doing it for a couple of months or a couple of days. It's doing it for years and years and years and years without any realisation you're going to get the outcome. And then every now and then you get little snippets of like winning the Theo thing and doing the rebranding, going, okay, we're doing all right. We've nailed it. I always say it's 90% of the work for 10% of the gloss and glory you actually see. Mm-hmm. But it absolutely is worth that 10%, 100%.
The iceberg.
Yep.
The iceberg effect, isn't it?
Yeah.
So then when you you kind of change your brands. Did you kind of start to change the way that you promoted that brand, or were you kind of doing things in the same way?
We just put our foot to the floor a little bit. There was some fear, I think, in the Savage era of putting out too much content around our ethos, not because we were ashamed of it, but more not sure how to promote it. And I think the rebrand allowed us to go, okay, we're going to give this a bit more juice now and really put it behind it. And we changed the way our ambassador program worked. We really incentivized a lot of people to get behind the brand. And we just kept putting out, particularly more on my page. It's difficult to put content out as a brand when you look at Gymbuck Athletics as a page, because primarily you're promoting clothing, right? Mm. But on my page, I'm the founder of the brand. I created the brand from a personal experience. I should share that more.
Yeah.
And that came down to the confidence of putting out content without feeling like you're being hammered by everyone. And I was putting stuff out in the Savage era, but not nearly as much as I am now. And like I said, I just put my foot on the gas and was like, let's just go for it. Let's just absolutely go for it. Figure out what works, figure out what doesn't work. We did events. We've done training sessions together at the gym, photo shoots together. We're going axe throwing as a team in like a couple of weeks or whatever. And it's about really living the values of what we stand for, because we talk about it all the time. This is who we are. This is what we stand for. But we didn't have anything tangible other than a t-shirt, which is still great. So we've now got our magazine. We've got the app that we run to try and encourage people to get fit. We've got events that we put on. We go and do charity days. We're at the ABP. We're doing all the things that we say we're about physically. And I think that's really what changed us from the previous time, was that we were very reserved in that sense. Mm. Whereas now it's just like all guns are blazing. Let's really put out what we stand for. And those who believe in it will buy up, and those who don't will move on.
Yeah. I like, it's worth talking about the event that you've got, that you're arranging. Because, again, it's like really unique.
The festival?
Yes.
Yes.
I looked at it and thought, like, this is...
It's a lot. It'll
big.
be the biggest thing I've ever done by a long way. I do get often asked, when I went on the radio, they're like, where do these ideas come from? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know where they come from. They just come into my head and we go, oh, that seems good. But this one really is something that I'm quite keen for. So having been to all those shows that I told you about, spent all that money being there, the one thing that really upset me was not being able to take my kids and my family along. I'm gone for probably the best part of a week by the time I've packed and done everything, got there, done it and got home. And I really love my fitness, and I think they could enjoy it too, but there was nothing there for them. You got the odd like games you can play, but it's basically a bunch of brands and businesses in a room trying to sell their product. And it works to a point, but it's very limited. And then I went to a summer fair that was put on by the local school, and that was more about fun. I thought, what if we could combine the two together? What if we could have a fitness festival style day with food, fun, games, but all the brands that come as well, so that we can bring that whole, we talk about fitness being a community. What if we could create that community and start locally? So the GAF was born. I've called it the home of fitness. It may change, but that's essentially what we're going with. It's the Gymbuck Athletics Fitness Festival. Now, the plan is to do it in September this year, if we can pull it off in time. It will happen regardless, whether it's this year or next year. It is going ahead. And that is the idea, combining a fitness festival with an expo, making it family friendly, but making it fun for everyone in all ages. So whether you're bringing your kids along like mine, who are like 6 and 10, or whether you're bringing on your grandparents that are on the treadmill every night getting their steps in, like, it's meant for everyone. So food vans, inflatables, guest speakers, all of it. It's going to be massive.
How do you go from kind of having this little idea of, I wonder if this would work, to actually getting to a point where it's happening and you're going ahead with it?
Meeting people that want to do it with you. There's this misconception that being the founder of a brand or being someone in charge of something, that it's just you. It's not, by any stretch of the imagination. I put out a video a couple of days ago about saying it's my brand, it's my vision, but it's theirs too. And these are the people that give up their time voluntarily to help my vision and reality come to fruition. So it's just networking. This is why I say don't discount any relationship you build over the years. A lot of the people I'm working with now, I met years ago, who I built relationships with, and you bank it for another day, the same way they do with me. So I just reached out to them, said, hey, this is my idea, this is what I want to do, what do you think, can you help me? And often, if they're the same people that buy into the same things you do, they'll be like, yeah, cool, why don't we make it happen? So I met Zoe Hansen, who does like radio, does Capital, still does a lot of it now, has her own podcast, at a Southampton Stadium business networking event. She was the host. We got chatting, we went on the tour together, followed on her Instagram, had a laugh and a joke on the day, stayed in touch. And the other day I was like, hey, I'd like you to host my festival. She's like, come meet me for a coffee. So I was like, okay, cool. Well, she's someone, she knows her stuff. So I'm like, absolutely, lean into those who know what they're doing. And they says, let me put you in touch with someone else who runs the ABP Southampton Marathon. So I was like, cool. So I went to meet him. He's now going to help me try and bring this all together and give me the guidance that I didn't have. And is now, we've got a space at the ABP where we're going to be promoting it. And, you know, leaning on others who are their experts in their field is absolutely what you should do. I don't know everything. I don't pretend to know everything, but I do know who to go and speak to sometimes. And I think getting the buy-in of others is really, really important because you can't pull it off by yourself. So the reason we're going to the uni in a couple of weeks is they're very keen to work with us on the festival and they'd like their students to play a part as volunteers. Absolutely. Can't be done on your own. But you have to have the confidence to put your idea out there and the risk that people aren't going to like it. What's the worst thing going to happen? People go, no, I don't want to do it. Then don't do it.
Yeah, so true. It's so true. And I think just talking to you now, you can really feel the passion. You know, you can really feel the, it's something that comes from within. You know, this isn't just something pipe
dream.
Yeah, this isn't something just to make you a few quid.
And I've already said on the first one that we are selling tickets, but they're very, very affordable. And the reason I've said I'm not worried about making a profit. That sounds ridiculous when you own a business, right? It's important. But I'm not worried about making a profit because I want to see it as a success. I don't want it to be a one-year thing. The council, and we're holding it at Itchen Valley Country Park, they're very, very keen for it. I've done it as a very good price on hiring the site for the day. And they said, will you do it more than once? I was like, if you'll have us more than once, yes. I'm thinking every year in multiple places in the country, not just how can I make a quick buck on this first go around. And I think that's an easier way to get the buy-in of others when they see that you actually care about making the event for the reasons you want to make the event, not just to line your pockets. And that's why it's, again, perhaps another cliche saying, but something that really coined our number one rule that we have as a brand, which is the brands that will thrive in years to come are those who have a purpose beyond profit. And I believe that wholeheartedly because profit's important, but if that's all you focus on, you're going to be so limited to what you can achieve.
I think that's really clear as well in everything that you put out. I think it's really clear that there's a real purpose behind it. And I feel like that's why people are really buying into your brand.
I hope so. That's what I try. I mean, I have no expectations on people. When I do things like this, when I go and talk at the uni, when I have conversations with people, it's not for me to sell my product. It's to share the idea, share what we're about. And if that's the way you are and the way that you're bought into life, then naturally you'll probably buy my product. But I don't do it with product in mind. I do it with share my journey. I'm not suggesting people start a brand. I'm not suggesting people go and do the things that I've done. But if someone takes a little something from what I've done and can use it in their own life, that to me is a success.
Yeah, brilliant. How do you go about finding ambassadors that share your values and share share the way that you want to represent your brand? It's
very difficult because when you look at social media, everybody wants to be the next influencer, right? And we don't use influencers really. We have done in the past, but it hasn't paid off for us at all. We've paid people to do things that have got big followings, and all you're doing is just paying someone to post. You lose what I've just talked about, which is the reality of what we do and why we do it. But naturally, we don't actually go hunting for ambassadors. They come to us, which sounds really egotistical, and I don't mean it to be, but often the content that we put out, people are intrigued as to why we're different. And that's usually the response we get when people join. We put a little survey out, like, why did you join the brand? They're like, oh, you're just different. It's never normally a straightforward answer either. It's just you doing things different to other brands, and they buy into the journey and they buy into the why we do it, not what we do. And then we try and promote that internally as well by saying, we only want one post a week from you, but compound that over the 80 or 85 ambassadors we've got. That's 300 plus pieces of content a month that is promoting my brand. But they're doing it legitimately. So I don't say, make a video of my product. I say, make a video based on your fitness journey and just wear my t-shirt. It's completely flipped. I'm not looking for you to promote my tee. I'm just saying wear it whilst you're doing the journey that you're set out to do. And I think that's where people come in a bit different. We used to have quite a high turnover, but because that's the program that didn't work. So we had kind of what we call Gymbuck creators and ambassadors in the same pot. And you had some that were really smashing it and some that really weren't bothered. And you could see others getting annoyed by the fact that everyone was getting a reward and no one was putting in the effort. Yeah. So we split them down the middle, but we make it accessible to everyone. So you can join as an ambassador and get 10% off and promote. If you're not really into creating content, that's fine. But if you really want to create, then you can become a creator and you get loads more discounts, added value, come extra, and all that kind of stuff. But there's a space for everyone. And I think that's what people get attracted to. Certainly when I've spoken to ambassadors, they like the fact that they can really invest or they can just be a part of it because they believe in it. But you get the natural churn of people, right? The ones that come in and go, have you got a free t-shirt? And I'm like, no, and they disappear. it's like, well, it's not free to me. So, but I think that's the same for everyone. That's not unique to my brand.
Yeah.
But I think the content we put out and the way that we position ourselves and just who we are. So when we do events, I always say to the team, like, what's my number one rule? And they hate it because it's not selling a product. The number one rule is no matter who you come across, whether it's me personally or any representative of the brand, that they have a great experience when they're around us. And that is it, period. That is our rule. So if someone comes to our stand at the ABP, they're going to have a great experience. And naturally, they'll either buy or they'll buy later. And if they're not interested in the brand, that's fine. They had a great experience. That's all I'm interested in. And I think that's why we attract a different kind of people.
Yeah, 'cause it's like a really, it's like a sales pitch, right? But it's not. So, people hate being sold to.
Absolutely.
So you're going about it in a really quite unique way of you're not chucking clothing in front of people saying, buy my shit. You're, saying...
We have a no bullshit attitude at Gymbuck. It's like, this is who we are. We're interested in your journey. Look at the products we do. And we do sell product. We do promote products. I mean, we're all wearing it. And we like to show the quality of it. And when we have to, we absolutely do. But the primary rule is just to say, this is who we are. This is where we came from. We're interested in your journey just as much as you are ours. And by the way, we do some great stuff and it's a good price. And 9 times out of 10, when you're not trying to... I've learned this from when I was a door-to-door fundraiser, right? Is when you're trying to tell someone they should pay for charity, it's very difficult. Whereas if you come to the door and you just explain, this is what we're raising the money for, and you're really transparent about it, and you say, this is what we'd like to get from you, and here's why, people are more open because they make a choice. Whereas you're forcing someone to make a choice, the answer is probably going to be no. So give people a choice, and you'll find that those who are interested will do, those who won't. And those who won't will never. So just let them go.
Yeah.
I think people focus too much on trying to sell to everyone rather than trying to sell to those who actually want to buy your product.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like how your brand is today and how you run that business, and thinking back to where you've kind of come from in the journey that it all makes so much sense, right? Because
it's all compounded. That's all it is. It's all compounded. What I know now is a result of what I've learned over the years, and having been through all those things, even when it comes to challenges, like I said, leaning into them, as unnatural as that feels, that all comes from experience that I've had, the places I've been, the things I've done, the failures I've had. I'm not perfect. I've made some royal screw-ups in my time owning the brand. It's money I've spent on things I should never have spent, but even that $7,000 with the NEC, right? Great event, really enjoyed it. Massive, massive chunk of money. Completely cleaned me out, to say the least. Had a massive team there. It was good fun. Should I have done it? Probably not. Would I have wasted the money somewhere else? Probably. So what? The decision is made now. Move on. And I'm not blasé about it because I don't care. I'm just like, I can't get that money back.
No.
I can only take the lessons from it and apply it to what I know now. And I think that's why we've grown so quickly, is because I'm not holding on to the past. I'm going, oops, got my little toolkit, and I'll keep going.
How do you stay consistent? Like, what's your strategy for making sure that you turn up every day?
Wow. That's harder. That's easier said than done, that one. I mean, I've got 4 kids, right? And I've got a very busy life. So it's turning up every day is subject to the time I actually turn up. But I've kind of got into this motion of, I'm not saying everyone should work 24 hours a day. That's ridiculous. You need your sleep. But what I have noticed is that I'm the kind of person that will just go until it's done. And the results of that really shine through. So it's more... everybody's working day is different, okay? Some people like to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, go to the gym, and then they finish at 9. Some people like to get up late and do late. I think you have to find what works for you, and I think I've found that. And mine is just working until I get the job done. If I do it today, is it going to impact tomorrow? If not, it's not essential. If it is, get it done. And there are some things that might take a couple of days to get done, but they're not going to have a massive impact on what you do. Like, for example, end of year, I've got to do my taxes and all, my numbers and everything else. Quite important, or I get fined. Mm-hmm. So that is a priority. Designing a new T-shirt for a launch in a couple of months is not a priority. So it's just understanding, and they change every day. But I think for me, it's just, I think I mentioned it before when we were talking, is having that moment to pause, reflect, and go, here's everything I'm dealing with. Now, what do I need to pick out of it as a priority? What can I change? What can't I change? And then focusing on those things. And it sounds really businessy, but it works. And it might not work for others, but it works for me.
It's quite, it's quite mad to hear that you're kind of engrossed in this brand, and it feels like you live and breathe the brand. But then you just kind of mentioned you got 4 kids.
Yeah.
Like how do you kind of manage that?
I prioritise time with my family as often as possible. So when I was making the presentation for the uni, I showed it to my wife and I said, what do you think I should add? She said, time. I was like, why? She goes, because when you have to give time to the brand, you have to give time to the brand. So when we do events, it's not just one day, it's a couple of days before, a couple of days after. Might be weeks of preparation, getting in everything we need to get in. It eats up a lot of my time. But on the flip side of that, the time where I spend with my family, my kids, I put my daughter to bed every night, unless I'm staying away, which is rare. Every night, that's my job. I bath her and I put her to bed, and no one will come between me and that. So if I get a DM or an email or a message at that time, you got no hope, absolutely no hope, because I will not answer it. I've had people saying, can we have a quick call on X, Y, and Z? No, I'm busy. And I think it's very easy to say to your family, no, I'm busy working. You have to flip it around sometimes. Yeah. You see these gurus like you need to give all hours of your day, you need to be selfish, you need to focus. Sometimes you do, but not all the time. And anybody who tells you that you have to give 100% of your time to your brand, your business to make it work is a moron, because my brand works and I don't give 100% of my time to it. But I've also built a very, very good team around me. I've got a brand relations manager, I've got a volunteer team leader for the Gaff, I've got a coach that writes for a magazine. I've got all these people bought into the idea and they help me. Arguably, I'm still driving the ship, a little bit erratically sometimes, but they're there and they help me. But you will not come between me and my family time. End of comment. It just won't happen. And I think it's a very delicate balance. Sometimes it's not always, if you look at, the cliche balancing on the triangle, sometimes it's shifted slightly and you've got more weight on one side than the other. But it's just something that I make my priority because my family is my priority. And I wouldn't have my brand without my wife's support, and I wouldn't have all the things I have without them, because what's the point? So I think I just make sure that I make the time for it. Easier said than done sometimes. Yeah. Particularly when you've got a long list of stuff to do, but I'm an adult. I stay up till 10, 11 o'clock at night. My kids don't, so I spend that time with them.
How important is your wife in all of this?
Very. She doesn't think so. She thinks, you just do your brand and I just sit on the sidelines. She has given me a fair bit of stick for it before, when it has eaten up a lot of time, when it's eaten up a lot of money. But deep down, when it comes to doing it, she sees that I enjoy it. She sees that I'm doing well at it. And she's very much behind it. She doesn't give herself enough credit, I don't think. We talked about it a little bit, like I said, with the university presentation, and she's mentioned in it because it's quite a task for her to buy into this idea that I'm throwing all this money at this thing. And she's like, it's just the gym. She doesn't gym. It's not her thing. It's not her scene. So she thinks I'm a bit nuts sometimes. But she is there, and particularly with the presentation I was doing, she listened to me talk through it, and she gave me some pointers. So when it really needs to, she backs me up. She challenges me, don't get me wrong. When the ambassador program first launched, and we had kind of people taking advantage of the brand and I was being too nice, she will challenge me. But I think that's healthy. I think I need to be challenged sometimes because I can be too soft. And I can be too inclusive, and I can be too, come aboard. In actual fact, I'm just being mugged off. So she's a good centre point for me. She definitely keeps me on the straight and narrow.
Something we talk about quite a lot on this podcast is that kind of belief that your partner, you need that, right?
Absolutely.
Because imagine a world where your partner didn't believe in what you were doing and, found it a frustration. It's really difficult to be 2 feet into the brand in the way you are without that support from home.
Well, it works both ways. So she's a nurse, quite high up in nursing as well. She teaches nurses to be nurses now, and she's done very well for herself. And it does demand a lot of our time as a family. Often I'll be running around after the kids sometimes where she's got to work late, and she's now taken on more. But I support her back because that's her thing. That's what she loves. That's what she loves to do. So every opportunity I get, I will support her back just as much as she supports me. I think this notion that when you're a family unit, you'll have to do the same thing. You'll have to have that same job or that same kind of corporate responsibility or whatever it is. Like, no, follow what you want to follow. And if you've got someone that's with you that promotes that, hang on to him, because that is gold dust. Because if it was the opposite way around and she hated my brand and I love my brand, that's a very difficult position to be in, because I'm giving up my dream because someone else doesn't like it. And, question whether how strong love is in that situation, but it makes it a very hard conversation to have.
Yeah, 100%. And what do your kids think of it all?
Oh, they love it. My daughter's only 2, and she's got, I do kids hoodies, so she's got a little pink Gymbuck hoodie.
That's so cool.
And she wanders around going, Gymbuck, 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 which is hilarious. But when we do the fun shows that we do at the school, they're great. They're like, this is my daddy's assault course. It's a big assault course as well that we put on. And it's all mostly for free, to be fair. But they love it. They think it's great. They don't really understand the gym. They're too young for that sort of thing. But when we do events and they come along and see me at my stand, they think it's a really cool thing to be a part of. I think as they get older, depending on what journey they go on, where they want to take themselves as young adults, they may get into it, they may not. I'm under no illusions they're going to inherit my brand. They can do what they want to do, be creative and explore, but it's nice to see them get on board with it and understand it to a point.
I think, again, when you go back to childhood and you kind of realise how influential your childhood is to becoming and successful or doing what you want to do with your life. It almost puts a little bit of pressure on as a parent, doesn't it, to make sure that you're inspiring and kind of motivating and all the rest of it. Like, how do you kind of manage that with your children?
It's difficult because they're so young, but I saw something the other day that was really profound about how, as a parent, not just as a dad, but particularly in my position, is to inspire my kids to follow what they want to follow and help them, let them make mistakes. A lot of my growing up was like, don't do this and don't do that. So I never learned those things until later on, which hit me even harder. You have to let people, go through that motion a little bit and be there to back them up when they need it. But with my kids, they're really big into YouTube at the minute, as is most kids, right? They want to start their own videos. My youngest boy, Harrison, I've got like a little GoPro type camera, and we went out to the forest the other day and I was like, just take it, just go nuts, do what you want. He'll either get it out of his system and decide it's not for him, or it'll be something he wants to take on. I'm cool with that, but you've got to let him try. And all I try and do is be the medium to allow them to try. If they want to get into designing some gymwear, which they've done with me before, or printing, like, they can. Just let them explore it a little bit while they've got the time, where they're not going to make the same financial mistakes I did. Get them to learn as much as possible. But the idea being is I'm trying to be, as a parent, that solid figure in their life that they know they can come to me with anything, and they're not going to follow some idiot on social media that's trying to tell them to do injections in their face and that rubbish. Because if I'm strong enough as a parent at home, they're not going to be bought into that crap.
Yeah.
There's like some idiot online doing whatever he wants to do. So that's where my motivation comes from, to be whoever I need to be for them. And it adapts, right? It's a growth thing. I'm not the best dad in the world. Sometimes I shout too much. Sometimes I'm too soft. Definitely too soft to my daughter, 100%.
Yeah.
She's got me wrapped around her little finger. But I try to always live to, like, okay, no matter what, they're going to see me as the person they can come to, or my wife, of course. And that's it. And that adapts every day. That changes all the time.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm the villain in my house. Sometimes I'm the best thing in the world.
It's life, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
To be honest, it's like, it is just life. And I think it's fascinating. I think it's fascinating how, to see where you've come from, to see the troubles that you've had at such a young age, how you've really used those lessons to get to where you are now. And I think, now it almost, kind of teaches you about the next generation, right? So like, how can we do things that are differently?
The world I grew up in is not the same world my kids grew up in. Like, I'm old enough to remember dial-up, all right? Yeah. I'm not even that old. I remember the first Nokia 3310. I had more iPhones than Apple themselves when I first managed to get a contract. Like, there's a different world, right? But I'm still young enough to understand what the world looks like now, and particularly because I operate in the social media space quite heavily, I get what they're seeing. Some of it's good, some of it's brilliant, and that's the type of content that I put out. Is that we met, I'm going to tell this story really quickly just before we came in. We met a young lad in the cafe just around the corner from here before we came in. We were doing some filming, and he was really interested in starting his YouTube channel and looking at cameras. And my videographer, who joined us today, let him have a go. We even sat him down with our microphones and said, like, just tell your story. To my brand relations manager came along and, really encouraged that. And that's what I want for my kids, is for them to have that opportunity to explore a little bit. And we'll send that parent that video and all that kind of stuff. And I think every opportunity you get to do that in any space that you're operating in, you should absolutely take the opportunity to do it, because I think we all look at kids as kids, and we should, but they are the future of our country, right? So let's try and make them better than the current future of our country we've got.
It's so powerful, because it's so easy, isn't it, just to be wrapped up in your own world and,
your blinkers
and
on,
focus on your own journey.
Yeah.
And I think it's so powerful to do something like that, which to you, I guess, felt like not a great deal, but to that kid, that could be, could be life changing for him.
I say to a lot of people,
him on the right path.
We were all a child once. And I think I have a deep sense of sympathy and empathy for adults who are going through hard times, because you were always a child once, and the opportunity to share with that little kids, most people would have been like, oh yeah, don't bother us with filming. I'm like, sit in my seat, you're in charge now, you're the boss. Give me the opportunity, And I think it's a small act of kindness, and I'm not some airy-fairy, tree-hugging kind of guy, but like I said before, if you get the opportunity to do it, and you can do it, do it.
Yeah, amazing. Cool. I mean, yeah, like I said, seeing your journey and understanding more about the brand and how it's been developed and why it's here has been really fascinating. Just go through a few little quick fire questions with you, if that's all right.
Of course.
So the first one is, what 3 things, if you had to, all of the stuff we've talked about, from a young lad whose parents have split up to get into where you are now, what are the 3 main things that have got you here, do you think?
Wow. Just 3. It's a very, very tough question to answer. I think based on what I know today, I would say being surrounded by the right people, although very much doing it on my own, having a good friendship group, friends I'm still friends with now, like we call them the bros, right? The people that are closest to you, definitely helped, because even to this day, despite the fact they'll mock me for all kinds of things I put out, if I need them, they're there 100%. And I think that really, really helps. And they were there more than my family were there. So when I had my wedding 2 years ago now, the table for my friends was bigger than my family.
Wow.
Yeah. Very, very. And it was the opposite for my wife. And I'm okay with that, because that's who became my family. The second one I think would be the challenges. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. It's some of the things, and I've only touched on a couple of things that happened, right? But all sorts of stuff has happened over the years. Some my fault, some not. I wouldn't change it for the world, but I do think it shaped me as to who I became now, by a long way. And sometimes not always positively, but mostly, I would say. And the third thing is probably a combination of those 2 has changed the way I view the world a little bit. And my experience of my illness has certainly changed the way I view the world. It kind of woke me up a little bit, got me out of that gutter that was just the bog standard 9-to-5 monotonous robot who didn't do anything but pay bills, watch telly. And you shouldn't have to have an event like that to change you, but sometimes it takes that moment to shift your mindset. But I think that constant leaning into things and being able to do it more, and the people that pushed me, so like I mentioned Craig, and I mentioned my old boss in Bristol, and even some more recent ones over the last, 5 years ago, just every now and then you come across someone who just does the thing you need them to do. And that in itself perhaps was the right time when I needed it. I don't believe in, I'm going to sound all philosophical and ethereal here, but I do think things happen for a reason sometimes. I'm lucky because I make my own luck, but there are some things that I'm just damn lucky to have, and I can't explain them. So every now and then those things happen, and it's about taking those moments and going, okay, I'm on the right path here. And self-reflection is important, right? But like I said, recognizing where you've come from is very, very important to where you're going. And I think that's what has made me be able to do the things that I do now. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it's really interesting what you say about luck.
Yeah.
It's something that comes up quite a lot in this podcast.
Yep.
Because personally, my opinion on it is that you have to put yourself in a position to get lucky.
Yep.
So, is it 100% luck? I don't think it necessarily is. I think
Depends who you ask.
I think that if you're not in that position to get lucky, then you're not going to get lucky.
It's a red car theory, isn't it? Another cliche thing.
The red car.
How many red cars did you see on the way here today? I don't know, because you weren't looking.
Yeah.
So it's sometimes just being a bit more self-aware and looking. Might not always see it, but if you're not looking, you're never going to see it. So.
Yeah, totally agree. What would you change about your journey?
Nothing. There's so many things I would want to change just to have not lived them. But if I hadn't lived them, I wouldn't be me. Maybe making the decision earlier to do what I did, but I don't control my illness, right? I can't help that. Maybe learning things quicker than I did. Maybe not wasting so much time on certain things. Maybe learning not to take what people say to me to heart too much, which is easier said than done a lot of the time, particularly when they're close to you and you think, why are you on the attack for some reason? But I don't think I change anything. I think that the vast majority of people that you might speak to have ever done anything with their life have faced challenges that they've had to overcome, and I don't think anyone would ever change them, because I wouldn't be who I am. Had the things not happened to me that were in Bristol, I would never have met my wife. I would never have the kids I have now. I wouldn't have the house I have now. I wouldn't have the brand I have now. If I never got ill, would I still be doing the same boring job, driving around every day, not spending time with my kids? Probably. You don't know. It's all well and good to say shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Yeah.
But no, I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But if you'd asked me this many years ago, I'd have had a different answer. But I'm content with where I am. And I'm quite happy that it's not the only challenge I'm going to face. I'm going to face some more going forward. But I'm ready for them.
Yeah.
What will be, will be. So.
Yeah, it's a great attitude. And what's next?
Oh, wow. What's not next? We have so much going. We talked about the gaff, didn't we? So that's next. That's probably my biggest challenge ahead. Of all the things I'm doing with the brand, that's the one that scares me the most because it's so big. It's so public. If it goes wrong, it goes wrong big. But I've got the right people around me to make it happen. I'm just going to keep pushing the brand forward. Growing the ambassador program is a big thing for me. You know, I really have seen the value of people buying into the brand. One of my ambassadors who joined the brand as an ambassador has now become a brand relations manager. It's helping me grow, and I want more of that. I want more people to feel like there is growth with us, that it's more than just clothing. And for me, more stuff like this, actually. It feels good to share the story because I don't want people looking at my page going, oh, that makes a great inspirational quote. Like, it's not just that. It's not the glossy part. It's reality for me.
Yeah.
Everything I put out comes from a position of experience, knowledge, or having lived it. And I certainly hope through this and through some of the talks I've got coming up at the uni that people can see the reality behind the brand, not from a, oh, poor me perspective. That's not what this is about. But if I can live this and do the things I'm doing, anybody can. And it sounds so cheesy, but anybody can. I'm not special. I've lived the same things that everyone else has lived. And it's more common now for your parents to break up and go through all those trials and tribulations in today's world. It's not the end. And I want to try and share as much of that as possible to maybe not inspire or motivate. You're not going to get everyone, but maybe just listen to it and go, okay, there is a way out. There is more. And that's what I want to try and do a bit more of.
Yeah. I think the reason that I started this podcast was because you look at people on social media that have been what we might deem as successful with their cars and their holidays, and you only ever see the outcome. You don't see the journey. Yeah. So you get kids that are just like, this is easy. And then what happens is they go into, they start their journey and they hit one hurdle and they stop because they're not prepared for it. And I think, this was the important thing for me is exposing those problems, making it real. Yeah. Because, you've had some incredible successes, but just sitting here chatting to you now, you're a real person. You've been through real challenges. You've had real, you've had to overcome some really serious stuff. And I think that's the piece that isn't advertised enough.
My talk at the university, so it's like 52 students. The subject is the things they don't tell you. All right, and there's a really great advert by Shopify and Mr. Beast, who I love, by the way. My shop is through Shopify. Mr. Beast is great, but they say you can start your own business for $29.99. I'm like, yeah, you can, but you can't build one.
No.
And it's the illusion behind it, and it's great, and it's never been more accessible to start your own brand or your own business. You can do it from your phone in half an hour, but to build one, there's so much more that goes into it. And it's the reason to share that story, particularly with the students, is not to scare them off and to go, oh, look how hard it is, but to go, just look how hard it can be, but here's some tools to help you push through it. But you have to have a strong enough reason why. And I coined a quote that I'd come up with some time ago: is find your reason why, master your mindset, craft your discipline, and then you'll unlock your potential. And those three are actual stages. It's not just a quote. Finding your reason why is finding the reason why is strong enough to do it. I mean, I've got many, as you already know from our conversation. Crafting your, sorting out your mindset is basically going, I've got a goal, I've got a vision, I've got a direction, and being really clear on that. The discipline part is going, okay, I've got my goal, I've got my why, now I need to do it automatically. So I'm going to come across hard stuff and go, okay, I know how to deal with it, rather than have an absolute meltdown. And if you can get all three of those right, you'll unlock levels to your life that you never knew. I never envisaged myself being on podcasts when I first started my brand. I never envisaged myself being on radio, in the newspaper, meeting Theo Pavitas, because I didn't have that kind of confidence or foresight. And now I'm thinking, not in an egotistical way, but what's next?
Yeah.
You just don't know. You don't know what's around the bend. So just lean into it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool. And I think, you're absolutely right. I think, it personally, the thing that's always stopped me is taking that first step. And I think, I've always been, I've got to have all my ducks in a row before I make that first step. When actually, what I found with this podcast is just got to do it.
Just got to start.
Like you say, lean in. Just get involved and work your way out, work things out as you go. You know, and I think that's that's a really good message. Where can people find more information about your brand?
The website, gymbuck.co.uk, nice and simple. You can follow us on socials. We only do Instagram, really. Facebook's not really a big space for us. TikTok confuses me, so I'll let someone else do that. But me is at the Jbuck with 2 Ys, and gymbuck.hq is our main handle for the brand. So any of those, and also DM me as well. Like, I'm not the kind of person that hides behind the brand, so I might not get back to you straight away because I've got lots of things to do. But drop me a message, talk about the brand. You know, I'm quite an open book when it comes to that sort of thing.
Amazing. It's been amazing talking to you today, Jay.
Thank you so
much for taking the trip up. Really wish you all the best at, with Gymbuck moving forward and the gaff. I live just down the road from Mitchin Valley, so I'll definitely be there.
I'll get you a ticket.
Supporting you. Cheers. Yeah. Really appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me, mate. It's been awesome. Thank you.
Brilliant. Cheers.
Yo, check it out. It's the Grind Diaries podcast. We share all our hustling stories. Yeah, from the struggles to the grind. We spill it on the mic, so sit back, relax.